The air in the courtroom tastes like dust and old paper. It sits heavy on my tongue, a physical manifestation of the tension coiled tight in my gut. Across the aisle he sits. My husband. The man who systematically dismantled my one lifeline, the single thread of hope I clung to when his world started suffocating me. He looks confident, almost smug, whispering something to his lawyer. He thinks he has this. He thinks he broke me so completely that nothing I say, nothing anyone says could possibly matter. My hands are clammy, balled into fists under the table. The judge is a stoic presence, high above us, a symbol of fate. My lawyer leans in, a quiet strength about her. She gives me a small nod. Then the bailiff calls the name. Not mine, not his. A name that hangs in the silence, utterly unexpected by him. Dr. Evelyn Reed. My therapist. The woman whose help he stole. His smile falters. His eyes dart to the door, where she will enter. Confusion. Then something else. Recognition. And finally, pure, unadulterated panic. It washes over his face, stripping away the confidence, leaving him exposed and suddenly, terribly, afraid. He knows, in that instant, exactly what this means. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know, more than words can say. We had a good life. Or I thought we did. The house on the hill with the big windows looking out at the city lights. The shared jokes over morning coffee. The easy comfort of a hand finding mine under the dinner table. He was charming, successful, everyone loved him. He was my rock, he said. My steady ground. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? The early years were a blur of happiness, building a life together piece by piece. We talked about the future, about kids, about growing old in that house, watching the seasons change from those big windows. I felt safe. I felt loved. I felt held. Maybe that's where it started. The feeling of being held so tightly, I didn't even realize at first that I couldn't move. It wasn't a sudden storm, more like a slow, creeping fog. Little things at first. A comment here, a suggestion there. My friends, did I really need to see them that often? My hobbies, were they really a good use of my time? Couldn't I be focusing more on us, on him? It was subtle, wrapped in concern, in love. I just worry about you. I just think you'd be happier if his world became my world, not through shared passion, but through gentle redirection. My own light began to dim, imperceptibly at first. I started saying no to coffee dates, canceling plans. It felt easier. Less friction. He liked it when I was home. He liked it when his focus was my focus. I didn't see it as control then. I saw it as devotion. As two people becoming one. It sounds naive now, pathetic even, but that's how insidious it was. The edges of my life softened, blurred, and eventually disappeared into the outline of his. My thoughts started to mirror his. My opinions became echoes. I lost my voice without ever realizing I wasn't speaking anymore. The anxiety started small. A flutter in my chest when he was late. A knot in my stomach if I had to make a decision without him. It grew. Panic attacks that left me gasping for air on the floor. Insomnia that turned nights into endless, terrifying stretches of darkness. I was a shell, rattling with fear I didn't understand. I knew something was terribly wrong, but I couldn't name it. I blamed myself. I was weak. I was ungrateful. I had this perfect life, this perfect husband, this beautiful house. Why couldn't I just be happy? Why was I falling apart?
He saw it.
Of course he saw it. He saw the trembling hands, the hollow eyes, the way I flinched at sudden noises. He expressed concern. Lots of concern. He held me while I cried, stroking my hair, whispering that I was stressed, just needed to relax, maybe see a doctor about medication. He suggested I needed help. Professional help. And in my desperation, I agreed. I didn't see it as an escape route, not consciously. I saw it as a cure for the sickness within me. The sickness he had unknowingly or knowingly, carefully cultivated. Finding Dr. Reed felt like finding a hidden spring in a desert. Her office was small, quiet, filled with soft light and the smell of lavender.
She didn't give me answers.
She gave me space.
Space to talk. Space to breathe.
Space to start untangling the knots in my own mind. She asked questions that gently probed at the edges of my reality. Questions about my marriage, about how I felt, about when the anxiety started. She listened without judgment, her eyes kind and steady. In those early sessions, the fog began to lift. Slowly, painfully, I started to see the pattern. The subtle manipulations, the isolation, the erosion of my self-worth masked as love and care.
It was terrifying.
Realizing the person you trusted most in the world was the source of your deepest pain, it shakes you to your core. But there was also a fragile seedling of hope. Dr. Reed told me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I was in a dynamic that was making me sick, and I could heal. I could find my way back to myself. I started scheduling sessions regularly. Once a week, then twice. Each one was a small act of rebellion, a step away from the world he had built around me. I felt stronger. I started making small decisions on my own, buying groceries without texting him for approval, choosing what to wear based on what I liked, not what he preferred. The anxiety didn't vanish, but it felt less like a defining characteristic and more like a symptom I was treating. I was finding my voice again, tentative at first, a whisper, but it was mine. He noticed. Of course, he noticed. He noticed the change in my demeanor, the flicker of independence in my eyes. He didn't like it. The subtle pressure began. He started calling more during the day, checking in, asking pointed questions about my sessions. What do you even talk about in there? Is she filling your head with ideas? He didn't trust Dr. Reed. He didn't trust my process. He trusted his control. Then the technical difficulties started. My car battery would die just before an appointment. An urgent errand would have to be run exactly when I needed to leave. He'd schedule important dinners, surprise trips, romantic evenings that conveniently overlapped with my therapy time. It was never malicious, not outwardly. Always cloaked in concern or spontaneity. Oh, honey, I completely forgot about dinner with the Andersons. It's tonight. Isn't that funny? And you have therapy?
A sigh.
A look of regret. Well, I suppose you could cancel. They'll understand maybe. The implication hung heavy, but I won't. I try to push back. I explained how important therapy was for me, how much it was helping. He'd nod, agree, promise to be more careful with scheduling. And then it would happen again. A sudden work crisis required him to use my car. His phone would conveniently die just when I needed him to confirm a time, making me late or forcing me to reschedule. It was a slow, steady chipping away at my access to help. Each canceled session felt like a physical blow, a step back into the fog. Then came the day he canceled them himself. I was sitting at the kitchen table, feeling particularly fragile after a difficult week. I had a session scheduled for that afternoon, a session I desperately needed. My phone rang. It was Dr. Reed's office. The receptionist sounded apologetic. Miss Thompson, I'm so sorry, but your husband called this morning and canceled all your upcoming appointments. My blood ran cold. Canceled all of them? Not just one. Not a conflict. A complete shutdown. I remember the silence after I hung up. The world outside the window kept moving. Cars drove by. Birds chirped. The sun shone. But inside the house, inside me, everything stopped. It wasn't just about the therapy sessions. It was about the sheer audacity, the violation of trust, the ultimate act of control. He didn't just put obstacles in my way anymore. He ripped the path out from under my feet. He decided for me that I was done getting help, that I was done getting strong, that I was done finding my own voice. When he came home that evening, I confronted him. My voice shook, but it was there. Why did you do that? Why did you cancel my therapy? He didn't look surprised. He didn't look guilty. He looked benevolent. Annoyed, perhaps, that I was making a fuss. Honey, he said, walking over to me, reaching out to stroke my cheek. I flinched away. His hand dropped. A flicker of something cold in his eyes. Don't be dramatic. I did what was best for you. That woman, she wasn't helping. She was making you question everything, making you unhappy. You just needed a break, a reset. She was helping me. I cried, the tremor in my voice turning to a raw ache. She was helping me understand what was happening. He sighed, a long, suffering sound.
Exactly.
Filling your head with nonsense. You need to focus on us. On getting back to how we were. How we were. I stared at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the charming husband, but the architect of my cage. How we were was me disappearing. How we were was me losing myself. His face hardened. The mask of concern dropped completely. Don't talk to me like that. I am your husband. I take care of you. I know what's best. His voice was low, dangerous. You don't need therapy. You just need to listen to me. That was the moment. The midpoint shift. Not a single event, but the crystallization of absolute truth. The man I loved, the man I built my life with, was not my protector. He was my captor. And he had just sealed off my one escape route. Despair washed over me, deeper than before. I was trapped, isolated. He had cut me off from the one person who saw the cage and was helping me find the key. The days that followed were a blur of suffocating tension. He acted as if nothing had happened, but his eyes were always on me, monitoring, controlling. He filled the space where my therapy sessions used to be, insisting we spend time together, go out, see friends, his friends, of course. Every interaction was a reminder of my lost autonomy. I felt myself shrinking back, the fragile voice I had found receding into silence again. The anxiety returned, a relentless wave threatening to pull me under. I was back in the fog, but this time I knew exactly what the fog was. It was him. He seemed to thrive on it, on my fear, on my dependence. He was the picture of the concerned husband, telling our friends how worried he was about my anxiety issues, how he was trying everything to help me. He twisted the narrative, portraying my struggle as some inherent flaw in me, something he was bravely trying to manage. And because he was so charming, so well-respected, people believed him. I was losing not just my sense of self, but my reputation. My reality was being dismantled piece by piece, not just for me but for the world to see. The deepening crisis hit when he started talking about my family, about limiting my contact with them for my health. They worried about me, he said. They made my anxiety worse. This wasn't subtle anymore. This was a direct attempt to sever the last remaining ties to my life outside of him. It was the final turn of the screw. I was becoming completely isolated, dependent on him for everything. Emotional support, his twisted version of it, social interaction, even my understanding of reality. I was drowning, and the man who had thrown me overboard was now offering me a hand, expecting me to thank him for saving me. I remember sitting alone in the big, silent house one afternoon, the sunlight painting cold rectangles on the floor. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were vacant, her shoulders slumped. She looked defeated,
Broken.
and in that moment, something shifted. A spark. Not of hope, not yet. Of pure, cold fury. Fury at him. Fury at myself for letting it happen. Fury at the world for not seeing. He wanted me broken? He wanted me silent? He wanted me gone?
Fine.
But if I was going to be gone, I was taking everything with me. The despair hadn't killed me. It had annealed me, hardened me. The fear was still there, a cold knot, but beneath it was a new layer of resolve. It wasn't about getting my old life back anymore. It was about building a new one he had no part in, one built on the ruins he had created. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. Real help. The kind he tried to steal. The turning point wasn't dramatic in action, but seismic in intent. I knew he monitored my calls, my emails. I couldn't contact Dr. Reed directly without him finding out immediately. I needed a different approach. A lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Someone sharp, someone who understood the subtle, insidious nature of control, not just the overt acts. Someone who would see the canceled therapy sessions not as a domestic squabble, but as a critical piece of evidence. Finding the right lawyer was difficult. It required careful planning, hush phone calls from burner phones, meetings in neutral locations. He was paranoid, always watching. I had to act the part of the compliant, anxious wife, while secretly gathering my forces. It was exhausting living a double life. But with each secret step, I felt a flicker of power returning. A sense of agency. I wasn't the drowning victim anymore. I was the submarine, moving silent and unseen beneath the surface. When I finally sat across the desk from Sarah Jenkins, the lawyer recommended by a discreet friend, I laid it all out. The marriage, the anxiety, the gradual isolation, the control, and the therapy, the hope it offered and his reaction to it, the cancellations, all of them. I had meticulously documented everything I could remember, dates, times, his excuses, the way it made me feel. Sarah listened, her expression grave but focused. When I finished, she didn't offer platitudes. She looked at me and said, "He didn't want you to get better. He wanted you dependent." The therapy wasn't a threat to your well-being, it was a threat to his control. It was the first time someone outside of Dr. Reed had validated my experience so clearly, so unequivocally. It felt like a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying was lifted. The canceled therapy sessions, Sarah said, her voice sharp and precise, are not just evidence of petty interference. They are evidence of deliberate harm, of preventing you from accessing necessary medical treatment for a condition he exacerbated. This is critical. That's when the plan solidified. It wasn't just about getting a divorce. It was about exposing him, about making sure he couldn't do this to anyone else, and about proving that his control, no matter how absolute it seemed, was built on a foundation of lies and manipulation that could be dismantled. The canceled sessions became the spearhead of our legal strategy. Filing for divorce was like dropping a bomb into the carefully constructed piece of our lives. He was furious, absolutely incandescent. He couldn't believe I had dared to defy him. He unleashed the full force of his vindictiveness. He froze my bank accounts, leaving me with almost nothing. He started spreading vicious rumors about me, that I was unstable, that I was having an affair, that I was trying to steal his money. He used his influence in our social circle to turn people against me. Friends I thought I could rely on suddenly wouldn't return my calls. I was truly alone, facing him and his considerable resources with only my lawyer and the truth. The legal battle was brutal. He fought dirty, contesting everything, dragging out proceedings, racking up legal fees, hoping to bankrupt me. He used my history of anxiety against me, presenting it as proof of my irrationality, my inability to make sound decisions. His lawyer painted a picture of me as a fragile, emotional woman who needed her stable, successful husband to guide her, implying that leaving him was a sign of mental distress fueled by a rogue therapist. We were fighting over assets, yes, but the real fight was over the narrative. His narrative was that I was broken, and he was the benevolent caretaker I was unjustly abandoning. My narrative was that he was a controlling abuser who had deliberately isolated and harmed me. The canceled therapy sessions were central to his story, proof I was too unstable to even stick with therapy, and central to mine, proof he actively prevented me from getting better. My savings dwindled. The stress was immense. There were days I questioned if I had done the right thing. Was the temporary freedom worth this level of pain and uncertainty? He seemed to be winning. His lies were more convincing because he was so good at appearing reasonable, hurt the wronged party. He brought out character witnesses, business associates, social friends he had charmed, who testified to his good nature, his generosity, his concern for me. It felt like the walls were closing in again. Sarah, my lawyer, remained calm. She knew what we had. The documentation of the cancellations, the timeline of his increasing control, the subtle inconsistencies in his story. But we needed something more. Something undeniable. Something that would shatter his facade in front of the judge. We discussed bringing Dr. Reed into it. It was risky. Therapist-patient confidentiality is paramount. Could she even testify? What could she say without violating that trust? Sarah explained the nuances. While she couldn't reveal the content of our sessions without my explicit waiver, She could potentially testify about the fact that I was a patient, the dates of attendance, or lack thereof, and potentially, depending on the jurisdiction and specific circumstances, observations about his behavior regarding my treatment if he had contacted her directly or interfered in ways she could professionally document. It was a long shot. It relied on Dr. Reed's willingness, on legal interpretation, and on whether her testimony could truly cut through the noise. But I knew, deep down, that she had seen it. She had seen the change in me, the struggle, the impact of his actions. She had been the one person who saw the truth when I was starting to see it myself. Making the decision to involve Dr. Reed was the final turning point. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about truth, about standing up and saying, "This is what happened, this is who he is, and you need to know." I signed the necessary waivers, authorizing Dr. Reed to cooperate with Sarah, to share whatever was legally permissible and professionally ethical. It felt like handing over the last piece of my vulnerability, putting my fate in the hands of two women who understood what I had been through. The fear was immense, but the determination was greater. We were going into battle, and we were bringing the quiet woman who had helped me find my voice. The day of the hearing arrived. The same courtroom, the same heavy air. He was there, looking every bit the confident, slightly aggrieved man, surrounded by his legal team. I sat with Sarah, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. The hours crawled by. His lawyer presented his case, twisting facts, omitting crucial details, painting me as unstable and difficult. He testified, smooth, articulate, a picture of wronged virtue. Listening to him lie, seeing him manipulate the truth so effortlessly, made my stomach churn. He spoke about my anxiety with a sorrowful tone, mentioning that he had encouraged me to get help, implying I hadn't stuck with it. He even mentioned paying for the sessions, framing it as an act of loving support I had squandered. Then it was our turn. Sarah systematically countered his points, presenting the evidence of his financial control, the timeline of isolation, the inconsistencies in his own statements. She chipped away at his polished facade, but he was resilient. He had an answer for everything, a way to twist every accusation back onto me. And then the climax. Sarah stood up, her voice clear and strong. "The petitioner wishes to call Ms. Evelyn Reed to the stand." Silence fell over the courtroom. A ripple went through the observers. His face, across the aisle, went slack.
Pure shock.
He hadn't anticipated this. How could he? He controlled everything. He paid. He canceled. She was supposed to be a non-entity, a forgotten detail in his narrative. He hadn't counted on my determination. He hadn't counted on Sarah's strategy. And he certainly hadn't counted on Dr. Reed. Dr. Reed walked in, calm and composed. She wore a simple suit, her expression serene.
She was sworn in.
His lawyer objected immediately, loudly. Confidentiality. Irrelevant testimony. Sarah calmly countered, explaining the scope of the testimony would be limited, focusing on observable facts regarding the scheduling and cancellation of appointments and the professional implications thereof, particularly concerning the prevention of medical treatment. The judge listened, considered, and overruled the objection. Dr. Reed was permitted to testify. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was the moment the quiet strength of truth would face off against the loud bluster of his lies. Sarah began her questioning gently. Dr. Reed confirmed her profession, her practice, that I was a patient. Then Sarah got to the point. "Dr. Reed, were there instances when Miss Thompson's appointments were canceled?" "Yes." Dr. Reed's voice was soft, professional, but carried in the silent room. "Can you describe the pattern of these cancellations?" Dr. Reed paused, gathering her thoughts. Initially, cancellations were infrequent, typically due to unforeseen circumstances on the patient's part. However, approximately 6 months into her treatment, there was a significant shift. Appointments began to be canceled with increasing frequency, often at the last minute. Sarah's voice sharpened slightly. "And who initiated these cancellations?" Dr. Reed looked directly at the judge, her gaze steady. In the majority of these instances, the cancellations were initiated not by the patient, Ms. Thompson, but by her husband, the respondent, Mr. Thompson. A gasp from the back of the courtroom. His face was ashen. He shook his head, a frantic, silent denial. Mr. Thompson called your office directly to cancel his wife's appointments. Sarah pressed. Yes, Dr. Reed confirmed. Our protocol is to verify cancellations with the patient when possible, especially when initiated by a third party. We attempted to contact Ms. Thompson, but were often unable to reach her in time, or the cancellations were made too close to the appointment time to reschedule. Sarah's questions continued, building the picture. She asked Dr. Reed about the purpose of the therapy, treating anxiety exacerbated by relationship dynamics. She asked if preventing a patient from accessing scheduled, necessary treatment was professionally advisable or detrimental to their health. Dr. Reed answered simply, clinically, that it was detrimental. Then came the plot twist, the moment I hadn't fully anticipated, the move Sarah and Dr. Reed had prepared. Sarah asked, Dr. Reed, in your professional opinion, based on your interactions with both Ms. Thompson as your patient and Mr. Thompson regarding the scheduling and cancellation of her appointments, did you observe any patterns of behavior in Mr. Thompson that were relevant to Ms. therapeutic progress? His lawyer was on his feet again, objecting furiously. Hearsay. Speculation. Beyond the scope. But Sarah was ready. This wasn't about the content of my sessions. This was about his observable behavior in relation to my access to treatment. The judge allowed the question, with a caveat. Dr. Reed was to limit her response to professional observations based on her interactions with Mr. Thompson or regarding his actions concerning the therapy. Dr. Reed turned her gaze towards the defense table. Towards him. Her expression was unreadable, professional distance perfectly maintained. But there was a quiet authority about her that silenced the room. Yes, she said, her voice calm but firm. Mr. Thompson contacted my office on multiple occasions, initially expressing concern for his wife's well-being. However, over time, his calls became less about facilitating her treatment and more about controlling it. Control. The word hung in the air like a death knell for his narrative. Dr. Reed continued, detailing instances where he had questioned the necessity of the sessions, where he had attempted to dictate the frequency or timing, where he had expressed skepticism about the therapeutic process itself. She spoke of his insistence on being the primary point of contact regarding her appointments, bypassing me, her patient. She described a pattern of behavior that, in her professional opinion, appeared to be aimed at undermining the therapeutic relationship and limiting his wife's access to independent support. She didn't use loaded terms like abuse or manipulation. She didn't recount anything I had said in confidence. She simply presented the facts as observed by a professional interacting with someone controlling access to medical care. But the implications were deafening. This wasn't just a husband canceling an appointment. This was a calculated effort to prevent his wife from getting better because her getting better threatened his control. As Dr. Reed spoke, his face crumpled. The smug confidence evaporated, replaced by disbelief, then horror. He looked like a man who had built his entire world on a secret fault line, and he was watching it split open before his eyes. He tried to interrupt, muttering loudly. His lawyer placed a restraining hand on his arm. He shook it off. He half rose from his seat, pointing a trembling finger at Dr. Reed, his voice hoarse. She's lying. She doesn't know anything. You can't listen to her. I paid her. I paid her to help my wife, not this. He was unraveling. His carefully constructed persona shattered, revealing the raw, ugly fear and rage beneath. He started shouting, incoherent accusations directed at Dr. Reed, at me, at the judge. The bailiffs moved swiftly. And then he collapsed. Not dramatically, like in the movies. His legs just seemed to give out. He slumped back into his chair, clutching his chest, his face contorted in pain, or maybe just the shock of his undoing. His lawyer immediately called for a recess, for medical assistance. The courtroom erupted in a controlled chaos. Medics were called. He was helped out of the room, still gasping, whether from physical distress or the sheer, visceral shock of his exposure. I couldn't be sure. The air, thick with tension moments before, now crackled with the aftermath of a sudden, decisive implosion. I sat there, numb. Watching him collapse wasn't the triumphant moment I might have expected. It was empty. Of validation, yes, but also a stark, pathetic end to a chapter of my life I had never wanted to write. He was gone, for now, his power over me broken not by my strength alone, but by the quiet, professional truth delivered by the woman he thought he had silenced. He tried to cancel my healing, but in doing so, he had signed the warrant for his own downfall. He was blindsided by the very person he believed he had neutralized. He had paid for the rope that hanged him. The recess lasted for hours. When we reconvened, he was not present, reportedly under medical evaluation. The judge, clearly unsettled but maintaining composure, addressed the court. Dr. Reed's testimony stood. Its impact was undeniable. It didn't just speak to his character. It spoke to his deliberate actions to prevent his wife from recovering, painting his earlier testimony about being a concerned husband as a calculated lie. The rest of the hearing felt anticlimactic after his dramatic exit. Without his presence, the energy shifted. His legal team was visibly shaken, their strategy in ruins. My lawyer, Sarah, efficiently presented the remaining evidence, tying it all back to the pattern of control established by Dr. Reed's testimony. The judge's ruling came a few weeks later. It was decisive. Citing Mr. Thompson's deliberate interference with my medical treatment as a significant factor demonstrating a pattern of harmful, controlling behavior, the judge ruled largely in my favor. Not only was the asset division equitable, but the ruling included provisions that explicitly acknowledged the emotional and psychological harm I had suffered due to his actions. It wasn't just a divorce decree. It was a vindication. A legal acknowledgement that what he did wasn't just marital problems. It was abuse, subtle and insidious, but real and damaging. The aftermath was quiet. No shouting matches, no dramatic confrontations in the courthouse hallway. He was gone from my life, legally and physically. The house on the hill was sold. The assets divided. I moved into a small apartment in a different part of the city, a quiet place with big windows that looked out onto trees, not city lights. It was strange, building a life from scratch, without the constant presence, the constant pressure. There was a profound loneliness, an echo of the years spent wrapped up in his world. But beneath the loneliness was a sense of spaciousness, of possibility. The anxiety didn't disappear overnight. Healing is a process, a slow, sometimes painful climb. I continued seeing Dr. Reed. Not because a court ordered it, but because I wanted to. Our sessions were different now. No longer focused solely on surviving his control, but on rebuilding, on rediscovering who I was without him. We talked about the trauma, about the lessons learned, about the strength I didn't know I had. She helped me process not just the years of control, but the bizarre anticlimactic moment of his collapse. It wasn't a victory to be celebrated with cheers, but a quiet acknowledgement that the truth, when finally spoken by the right person, can be more devastating than any weapon. I learned that control isn't always loud and obvious. Sometimes it whispers, wraps itself in concern, and convinces you that the cage is actually a sanctuary. I learned that losing yourself is a silent process, like erosion, happening so slowly you don't notice until the foundation is gone. But I also learned that the core of who you are is resilient. It can withstand surprising amounts of damage. And that the people who truly see you, who offer a hand not to hold you down but to lift you up, are the most precious treasures in the world. Dr. Reed was one of those people. Sarah Jenkins was another. My life isn't perfect now. There are still scars, moments of doubt, echoes of the fear. But I am free. I make my own decisions, big and small. I see my friends. I pursue my own interests. I am finding my voice again, and this time, it feels stronger, clearer, less afraid. The house on the hill, the city lights, the man who wanted to own my light, they are all in the past. I am here, in this quiet space, breathing my own air, charting my own course. The man who tried to cancel my healing ultimately paved the way for a deeper, truer recovery than I could have ever imagined. He collapsed, and I rose from the ruins he created, stronger, clearer, and finally, truly free. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life.